Have you ever ignored someone's warning because you thought they were too quiet to know the truth? What if that one mistake almost cost an innocent man his life? Before we continue, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves powerful true style stories. Your support helps us bring you more unforgettable stories every week. The morning started like every other day at Riverstone Medical Center. Ambulances arrived one after another. Nurses hurried through the hallways. Doctors prepared for another long shift. Machines beeped from every direction. And families waited with hope written across their faces. Among all the busy staff was a new emergency room nurse named Ava Carter. Most people barely noticed her. She spoke politely, never argued, and always stayed focused on her patients. Some of the senior staff thought she was simply another quiet nurse trying to fit into a famous hospital. What nobody knew was that Ava had once served as a Special Forces combat medic. She had spent years treating wounded soldiers in dangerous places where every second meant the difference between life and death. She had seen explosions, battlefield injuries, and impossible situations that no hospital could ever prepare someone for. After leaving military service, she accepted a confidential assignment. Officially, she was just another emergency nurse. Unofficially, she was helping federal investigators examine unusual financial activities inside Riverstone Medical Center. Several expensive medical devices had been billed to government insurance programs, but many of those devices could not be found inside the hospital. Patient records had also been changed after surgeries. Nobody knew exactly who was responsible. That was why Ava was there. Her mission was simple. Do her job. Save lives. Watch carefully. Tell nobody. Every morning she arrived before sunrise. She checked emergency equipment. She organized medications. She greeted every patient with kindness. Soon, many nurses appreciated working with her because she never complained and always helped during difficult cases. One person, however, never respected her. Dr. Adrian Blackwell. He was the hospital's most famous surgeon. His photographs decorated the hospital lobby. News magazines called him one of the country's finest specialists. Wealthy patients waited months just to schedule appointments with him. Whenever he walked through the hallway, conversations stopped. Junior doctors stood straighter. Even experienced nurses avoided disagreeing with him. To many people, he seemed perfect. But Ava noticed something different. She noticed how people became nervous whenever he appeared. She noticed nurses checking their words before speaking. She noticed residents apologizing even when they had done nothing wrong. Fear had become part of the hospital's daily routine. Instead of asking questions, Ava simply watched. That was what years of military experience had taught her. Sometimes people reveal the truth without saying a single word. Weeks passed. Ava learned everyone's habits. She remembered which supply rooms were always locked. She learned which elevators executives preferred. She memorized every emergency procedure. At the same time, she quietly documented unusual events. Medical equipment ordered twice. Supplies disappearing without explanation. Digital records changing late at night. Small details. By themselves, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. One afternoon, while helping organize surgical equipment, Ava noticed something strange. A shipment worth thousands of dollars had arrived. According to hospital records, identical equipment had supposedly arrived only 3 days earlier. Yet nobody could explain where the first shipment had gone. When she casually asked another employee about it, the woman became uncomfortable. "Don't ask too many questions," she whispered. "People who ask questions don't stay here very long." Ava simply nodded. She wrote everything down later that evening. Days turned into months. She earned the trust of patients. Doctors appreciated her calm attitude during emergencies. Families often thanked her for explaining medical situations in simple language. Still, Dr. Blackwell barely acknowledged her existence. To him, nurses were there to follow instructions. Nothing more. One rainy Monday morning, everything changed. Emergency dispatch called ahead. Construction accident. Male patient. Serious chest injury. Possible internal bleeding. Estimated arrival in 4 minutes. The emergency team immediately prepared Trauma Room 1. Ava checked the blood supplies. Another nurse prepared emergency medication. The emergency physician reviewed the incoming report. The ambulance doors burst open. Paramedics rushed inside with a middle-aged construction worker named Daniel Brooks. His breathing was fast. His skin looked pale. His blood pressure had already started falling. Ava gently placed 2 fingers on his wrist. His pulse was weak. She looked at his face. Something wasn't right. The injuries looked smaller than the pain he was showing. Experience told her there was likely hidden internal bleeding. She immediately informed the emergency physician. "I think we need emergency imaging before surgery." The physician nodded. "I agree." Just then, Dr. Adrian Blackwell entered the trauma room. He wasn't assigned to the patient. Still, everyone immediately made space for him. He glanced at the monitor for only a few seconds. "We don't have time," he said confidently. "Prepare the operating room." The emergency physician hesitated. Ava looked again at the patient. His abdomen had become tighter. His blood pressure dropped another few points. She knew that pattern. She had seen it before. Not once. Not twice. Dozens of times. On battlefields where helicopters arrived too late. She stepped forward respectfully. "Doctor, I strongly recommend a CT scan first." The room became silent. Several nurses exchanged nervous looks. Nobody usually questioned Dr. Blackwell. He slowly turned toward Ava. His expression was calm, but his eyes showed irritation. "Are you questioning my judgment?" Ava answered without raising her voice. "I'm speaking for the patient." Dr. Blackwell took one step closer. "You are a nurse." "I know. I'm the surgeon." "I know. But something is being missed." The patient suddenly groaned in pain. Everyone looked toward the monitor. His blood pressure had fallen again. The emergency physician looked uncertain. For just a moment, the entire trauma room stood frozen between 2 decisions. One choice could save a life. The other could become a tragedy. And in the next few seconds, Ava would discover that the greatest danger inside Riverstone Medical Center wasn't the patient's injury. It was the pride of the man standing in front of her. Nobody moved. The machines continued beeping, but the people inside the trauma room seemed frozen. Dr. Adrian Blackwell stared directly at Ava. "You've been here only a few months," he said quietly. "I've been saving lives for over 20 years. Ava remained calm. "I respect your experience, doctor. Then stop interfering." The emergency physician looked from Ava to Dr. Blackwell. He knew something felt wrong. But he also knew that disagreeing with the hospital's most respected surgeon could destroy his career. The patient suddenly grabbed Ava's wrist. His breathing became heavier. I can't breathe." Ava leaned closer. "You can hear me, Daniel?" He nodded weakly. "My stomach." He placed a shaking hand on the left side of his abdomen. Ava immediately understood. The pain was spreading. His skin had become colder. His lips were losing color. These were dangerous signs. She looked back at the emergency physician. "We're losing time." Before anyone could respond, another nurse rushed toward them. "Blood pressure is dropping again." Everyone looked at the monitor. The numbers were falling. Dr. Blackwell frowned. "Move him." Ava stepped beside the stretcher. "No." The room became silent again. Several nurses stared at her with wide eyes. Nobody had ever spoken to Dr. Blackwell like that. "You said what?" he asked. "I said no. You don't have the authority." "I just think. You think too much." The physician lowered his eyes. Ava looked around the room. Everyone looked afraid. Not of the patient. Not of the emergency. They were afraid of one man. Daniel groaned again. His breathing became weaker. Ava knew they had only minutes. She made a decision. She pressed the emergency imaging button herself. The radiology department immediately answered. "CT room ready." Dr. Blackwell's face changed. "Who authorized that?" "I did." "You'll regret it," Ava calmly replied. "If I'm wrong, I'll accept the consequences. But if I'm right, he'll still be alive." The emergency physician finally stood beside Ava. "We're taking him." Several nurses quickly unlocked the stretcher. The transport team pushed Daniel toward the hallway. Dr. Blackwell shouted, "Stop!" Nobody stopped. For the first time in years, people continued walking instead of obeying him. Inside the CT room, the atmosphere was tense. The scanner slowly rotated around Daniel's body. Nobody spoke. Everyone watched the monitor. The first images appeared. The radiologist leaned forward. His expression immediately changed. "Oh no." The emergency physician stepped closer. "What is it?" The radiologist pointed at the screen. "There." A serious tear inside a major blood vessel. Hidden internal bleeding. Exactly where Ava had suspected. If surgery had started without discovering it, Daniel's chances of surviving would have been extremely small. The room became completely quiet. The emergency physician slowly looked at Ava. "You saw this without a scan?" Ava nodded. "I've seen similar injuries before." The radiologist immediately called the vascular surgery team. "Prepare operating room 3. Emergency vascular procedure. This patient cannot wait." Within seconds, doctors and nurses began preparing the correct operation. The emergency physician walked over to Ava. "You saved him." She shook her head. "Not yet. We still have to get him through surgery." As Daniel was rushed toward the operating room, his frightened wife finally arrived. She was soaked from the rain. "What happened to my husband?" Ava gently held her shoulders. "He needs emergency surgery." "Is he going to survive?" Ava looked directly into her eyes. "We found the problem just in time. We're giving him the best chance possible." The woman began crying. "Thank you." Ava smiled softly. "We're not finished yet." Back in the emergency department, rumors spread faster than anyone expected. Doctors whispered in hallways. Nurses gathered in break rooms. Everyone had heard the same story. The new nurse had challenged Dr. Blackwell. And she had been right. Meanwhile, Dr. Blackwell locked himself inside his office. He replayed the morning over and over. He wasn't thinking about Daniel. He wasn't thinking about the operation. He was thinking about something else. His reputation. For years, nobody had questioned him. Now dozens of hospital employees had watched him make the wrong decision. His phone rang. It was the hospital director. "We need to talk." "I know. Come to my office." 20 minutes later, Ava was called to a meeting. She entered a large conference room. The hospital director sat at the table. 2 senior administrators were beside him. Dr. Blackwell stood near the window with his arms crossed. Nobody smiled. The director cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, you created quite a situation today." "I was trying to save a patient." "No one is denying that. But hospitals follow chains of command." Ava answered calmly. "Hospitals also exist to protect patients." Nobody replied. The silence lasted several seconds. Finally, the emergency physician entered the room carrying a printed report. "The surgery has started." The vascular team confirmed the CT findings. The patient would likely not have survived under the original surgical plan. The room became silent once again. One administrator slowly removed his glasses. The hospital director leaned back. Dr. Blackwell said nothing. For the first time, he had no argument. The emergency physician looked directly at the director. "I support Nurse Carter's decision." Another doctor entered. "So do I." Then another nurse spoke. "I was there. She warned everyone before the scan." More staff members began arriving outside the conference room. No one planned it. But people who had stayed silent for years suddenly found the courage to speak. One by one, they stepped forward. And for the first time in a very long time, Dr. Adrian Blackwell realized that fear no longer controlled the room. The conference room slowly became quiet again. The hospital director looked around the room. For years, everyone had accepted Dr. Adrian Blackwell's decisions without question. Today was different. People were finally speaking. One nurse stepped forward. "I've seen patient reports changed after surgeries." Another doctor added, "I've questioned supply records before." A technician spoke next. "Medical equipment often disappeared from storage, but the inventory always showed everything was normal." The director looked shocked. Why didn't anyone report this earlier? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, an older nurse spoke. We did. The room turned toward her. We reported concerns several times. What happened? Our complaints disappeared. Another employee nodded. We were told not to create unnecessary problems. A young resident took a deep breath. I almost lost my position last year after questioning one of Dr. Blackwell's surgical decisions. The room became heavier with every new sentence. Each person had stayed silent for years. Now they realized they weren't alone. Ava quietly listened. She wasn't surprised. Fear often keeps honest people silent. But once one person stands up, others begin finding their own courage. Just then, the conference room door opened. 3 people entered. They weren't hospital employees. They wore dark business suits. Each carried an official identification badge. The room instantly became silent. The woman leading the group introduced herself. My name is Sarah Collins. I'm with the Federal Healthcare Investigation Division. Several people exchanged nervous looks. The hospital director stood up. Federal investigators? Sarah nodded. Yes. We've been reviewing this hospital for several months. Dr. Blackwell's expression changed. What does that have to do with today? Sarah calmly answered, quite a lot. She turned toward Ava. Thank you, Miss Carter. The hospital director looked confused. You know each other? Sarah smiled slightly. Yes. For several months. Everyone looked toward Ava. She calmly reached into her pocket. She removed her hospital ID. Then she placed another identification card on the conference table. Federal Medical Investigation Unit. Special Operations Medical Consultant. The room became completely silent. Nobody expected this. The hospital director stared at the card. So, you've been working with federal investigators? Ava nodded. Yes. My assignment began 8 months ago. The director slowly sat back down. Dr. Blackwell folded his arms. This is ridiculous. Sarah looked at him. Is it? She placed several folders on the table. Inflated equipment purchases. Modified patient records. Insurance billing irregularities. Unauthorized digital access. Every folder carried dates, signatures, financial reports, audit records. The director slowly opened the first folder. His face became pale. This can't be real. Sarah answered. It is. We've confirmed every document. Dr. Blackwell remained calm. You're accusing me based on paperwork? No, Sarah replied. We're accusing several people based on months of evidence. A hospital accountant suddenly entered the room. He looked nervous. I need to say something. Sarah nodded. Go ahead. The accountant swallowed. I noticed unusual payments last year. Large invoices. Duplicate purchases. When I questioned them. He looked toward Dr. Blackwell. I was told to stop asking questions. Another employee raised her hand. I found surgical reports that didn't match patient files. Then another voice came from the back. I saved copies. The room became even quieter. Sarah turned. You have copies? The employee nodded. I was afraid the originals would disappear. Do you still have them? Yes. Sarah smiled. We'd like to see them. Within an hour. Several employees had brought old documents, printed emails, inventory reports, patient notes, computer backups. Every piece fit another part of the puzzle. The evidence became stronger. Meanwhile, Dr. Blackwell quietly walked toward the hallway. He pulled out his phone. He called his attorney. No answer. He called another board member. Straight to voicemail. He called the hospital's legal department. Nobody picked up. For the first time in years. He realized he was alone. Inside the conference room, Sarah continued organizing the documents. She looked at Ava. You did excellent work. Ava shook her head. The staff did. They finally decided to tell the truth. Sarah smiled. Sometimes that's the hardest part. At that moment, the emergency physician rushed into the room. The surgery is over. Everyone stood. How is Daniel? The physician smiled. He made it. Several nurses wiped away tears. The tension inside the room finally eased. Ava quietly closed her eyes for a second. The patient had survived. That had always been her first priority. Not investigations. Not paperwork. Saving a life. A few minutes later, Ava walked toward the intensive care unit. Daniel was awake. Weak, but alive. His wife stood beside him. The moment she saw Ava, tears filled her eyes. She hugged her tightly. You saved my husband's life. Ava gently smiled. It was a team effort. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. I heard. They said you fought for me. Ava shook her head. I simply listened. Your body told us what was wrong. Daniel smiled weakly. Thank you. You gave me another chance. Ava looked around the room. Every nurse, every doctor, every family member had witnessed something important. Medicine wasn't about titles. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about reputation. It was about listening. Listening to patients. Listening to evidence. And having the courage to speak when something feels wrong. Outside the ICU window, rain slowly stopped falling. For the first time that day, sunlight began breaking through the clouds. It felt as if the hospital itself was finally breathing again. The next morning, Riverstone Medical Center looked the same from the outside. Patients continued arriving. Ambulances still rushed through the emergency entrance. Doctors wore white coats. Nurses hurried through the hallways. But inside, everything had changed. The investigation officially began. Federal investigators collected computers. Financial records were secured. Patient files were carefully reviewed. Several departments were temporarily closed while evidence was examined. Hospital employees quietly watched as investigators carried sealed boxes through the corridors. Nobody expected to see something like this happen at one of the country's most respected hospitals. Later that morning, the hospital board held an emergency meeting. Every board member attended. The atmosphere inside the conference room was tense. No one smiled. The chairman finally spoke. Our first responsibility has always been patient safety. He looked around the room. If we failed in that responsibility, we must accept it. The room remained silent. A few minutes later, investigators entered with new evidence. More altered medical records, financial transactions, emails, electronic audit logs. The evidence continued growing. One board member slowly removed his glasses. This is much worse than we imagined. Sarah Collins nodded. The investigation is still ongoing. But the evidence already shows a clear pattern. Meanwhile, Dr. Adrian Blackwell sat alone inside a small interview room. His confidence had disappeared. His expensive suit no longer made him look powerful. His reputation could no longer protect him. An investigator entered carrying another folder. He placed it on the table. We've confirmed additional witness statements. Dr. Blackwell looked away. We've also recovered the original patient reports. Still no answer. The digital records matched the copies provided by hospital employees. Silence. Finally, Dr. Blackwell spoke. I spent 20 years saving lives. The investigator calmly replied. And one wrong decision can erase years of trust. Dr. Blackwell lowered his head. For the first time, he had nothing left to say. Across the hospital, Ava returned to the emergency department. Many nurses smiled when they saw her. Some quietly thanked her. Others simply nodded with respect. The older nurse who had spoken during the meeting walked over. You gave us courage. Ava smiled. No. You already had courage. You only needed someone to go first. The nurse's eyes became emotional. I almost resigned last year. I'm glad you didn't. Nearby, the young resident approached Ava. I owe you an apology. She looked at him. For what? I knew things weren't right. I stayed quiet. Ava gently smiled. What's important is what you choose to do now. He nodded confidently. I won't stay silent again. Over the following weeks, the hospital slowly rebuilt itself. Several senior administrators resigned. New leadership arrived. Anonymous reporting systems were introduced. Medical records received stronger security. Independent safety reviews became mandatory. Every employee received additional training about patient advocacy. For the first time, nurses were encouraged to question decisions if patient safety was at risk. The culture slowly changed. One afternoon, Ava visited Daniel before he was discharged. He looked much healthier. His wife smiled as Ava entered. Daniel carefully stood up. "I wanted to thank you in person." "You don't have to. Ido." He reached into his bag. "I made something." He handed Ava a small wooden plaque. It had been carved by hand. Across the front were simple words. "The bravest voice is the one that speaks when everyone else is silent." Ava quietly read the message. She smiled. "I'll keep this forever." Daniel laughed. "My grandchildren still don't believe a nurse argued with a famous surgeon." Ava laughed too. "It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about giving you another chance." Months later, Riverstone Medical Center looked different. Not because the building had changed, because the people inside had changed. Doctors listened more carefully. Nurses spoke with greater confidence. Residents asked questions without fear. Patients felt safer. Trust slowly returned. One evening, Ava finished another shift. She walked outside as the sun disappeared behind the city skyline. Her confidential assignment had officially ended. Her federal supervisor met her near the parking lot. "You did outstanding work." Ava smiled. "The hospital did the hard part. They chose the truth." Her supervisor nodded. "So, what's next?" Ava looked toward the emergency entrance where another ambulance had just arrived. Another hospital. Another mission. There are always people who need someone willing to stand up. Her supervisor smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that." Ava quietly picked up her small backpack. Just like the day she first arrived. She walked away without expecting praise. She never wanted attention. She never wanted recognition. She only wanted every patient to have the chance to go home alive. And sometimes, one calm voice, one difficult decision, and one person willing to stand alone can change an entire hospital forever. So the next time you see someone quietly speaking up, don't ignore them. They might notice the one thing everyone else has missed. Because true heroes don't always wear medals. Sometimes, they wear simple blue scrubs. And they save lives simply by refusing to stay silent.